terrified, and then I see the look in your eyes.
Turn around, bite eyes. Every now and then I fall apart.
And I need you now tonight, and I need you more than ever.
Guess I will be the one to vocalize on this particular topic. Earlier we have created a video and even commented on another's, basically saying how those with BPD interest us as one with ASPD. I will be explaining how so into different ways. The antisocial self, containing callousness, manipulation, sadism, etc. And the non-antisocial self, or the more healing side. Now, before I begin my experience in how one with BPD captures my interest, will most likely be different than another. Now, when it comes to my antisocial self and observing one with BPD, I find those with BPD to be an interesting quote-unquote toy, while I seek those who generally benefit me. The benefit I get from someone with BPD is the fact they are able to keep my interest at a level in which my boredom subsides. For those who do not know or may have forgotten, those of us with ASPD are chronically bored even when we do not want to be, while others are able to entertain themselves when bored. It can take a lot for one with ASPD to break the boredom and not give in to impulses and become compulsive. So for me, in my callous antisocial state, what eases my boredom when it comes to one with BPD is when they are splitting. Now, while I do not fully understand BPD, I understand in general their brain works in black and white, all good or all bad. My quote-unquote callous interest in them splitting is primarily how long can I toy with them until they break completely. My antisocial self sees those with BPD as a pawn or patsy. A pawn in terms of how much and long can I play with them, and patsy in terms that I will use them as the quote-unquote fall being. The brain structure of those with BPD interests my antisocial self, especially again when they split due to the fact I am able to see how vulnerable and use that vulnerability to my advantage. Their black and white thinking way of observing the world. It gives me the quote-unquote urge to discover how long can I place their mind in the all-white, all-good prospect, essentially adding myself as their quote-unquote favorite person, until I feel the desire to shift their mind into all black, all bad, purposefully causing them to split, playing a little game with their brain. My antisocial self would observe the individual with BPD splitting, as if I am watching a show on television, and my quote-unquote reactions may vary. I do not often receive a sort of satisfaction, gratification, sadistic feeling when I intentionally cause a split to happen. Sometimes I would not care about their intense negative emotions. A feeling of apathy would appear, causing me to see them as inferior, weak, crybabies, etc. However, even if on days I view them as inferiors, people with BPD still benefit my boredom and tendencies. So my antisocial self is still all right with playing their mind, disorder emotions, etc. A more physical feeling I receive when toying with them. To me it feels as if I am either riding a smooth river, peaceful, and other times it feels I am on a roller coaster, filled with adrenaline fun. And though I talk much on BPD splits, and how my antisocial self views them, it is not the only factor in which my more quote-unquote callous self views as something to play with, as there are other symptoms within BPD. As said before, I quote-unquote act as someone who those with BPD can depend on until I am put on their pedestal, becoming their favorite person, before slowly performing what would be considered perhaps their worst nightmare. Abandoning them, however, if I do consider abandonment, I would first tattoo myself in their minds, so even if they claim the worst about me, I will still be in their minds, playing with them even if I never speak to them again. A BPD's fear of abandonment, obsession needing to place someone on a pedestal, gives fuel to my grandiosity, even if I am doing just the bare minimum. Being viewed as like a higher being to them gives me a sort of pleasure and authority, even though I am a reflection of what they imagine of me. Being antisocial, I have the capability to blend, become what people think I am, etc. Now, to ease everyone's mind and wariness of me, I do not often play sadistic, callous mind games on those with BPD, for the satisfactory of taming my boredom. There is, in fact, a genuine interest towards those with BPD. Call it an interest with curiosity and being impressed by them. Now, for someone like me or Moras, who has ASPD and alexithymia, in which emotions are more scarce and foreign, it impresses me observing the emotional intensity those with BPD possess. Normally, my antisocial self would regard high emotions as inferior and weak, something not to be taken serious as it can be easily played. However, my genuine, non-antisocial self find the polar opposite to be a bit fascinating. Watching the more intense emotion of those with BPD, whether it be negative or positive, very much attracts me. And even in a genuine, non-antisocial sense, it very much eases my boredom. Now, will I go out of my way to cause one with BPD to have intense emotions split, or even befriend them all? Certainly not. I am trying my best to be a decent gremlin, even though the world irates me. Now, in terms of both my antisocial self and non-antisocial self, BPD as a whole is just in turns fascinating, a roller coaster of contrivances, rather than the same boring loop over and over. Although many with BPD could argue that they too suffer the same contrivance within their own disorder, the constant loop of intense emotions. Through the eyes of one with the SPD, it doesn't seem so boring. As well, those with BPD, I find them to be one of the very few who can stand against my antisocial self, the callousness, manipulation, lack of empathy, etc. While I only am callous and use manipulation tactics towards those who I deem lower than an insect and worthy of such, I still lack empathy on the more emotional sense. So, whether I am being my antisocial self or my non-antisocial self, I do not feel empathy when one with BPD splits. Admittedly, I do feel a bit triumphant when I know I am the cause. However, as said before, I am trying my best to be a better being, and educating myself more on the disorder. Although I am doing my best in understanding BPD more, I still can fall into my callous, antisocial self, especially when it feels to me I have been played, even if the person with BPD did not mean to. Now, normally I would not care and just let that individual lash out. My lack of reaction tends to anger people more. So one can assume how one with BPD during a split can be towards one who is not reacting to their lashes as they probably think. I can also go full callous, vengeful, etc. However, I nowadays tend to do it more towards those who rightfully deserve it, and I suppose lastly, towards who I consider my exceptions. While I will not have much a reaction towards my exceptions, I will still let them lash out however much and long they need it. Give them space, breaks, whatever needed. And overall, I will be a little more lenient, forgiving towards those I deem to be my exception. While not everyone I meet and befriend will be my exception, I still am educating and wanting to be educated on the disorder, the life, the brain structure, the struggles, etc. Once again is just generally fascinating.